Now that we have the toothbrush head complete, let's go ahead and start the toothbrush body. I'm going to go up here to the very top and I'm going to click on New Design, little plus sign there. Now we'll save this. Make sure I'm going to the exact same folder, same location. I'm going to call this one Toothbrush Body. And I will click Save here. It's going to save a blank new design. And I'm going to start off by creating the connection point for the toothbrush. So I'll create a sketch, circle, center diameter circle, or I can click the C on my keyboard as well. Click this vertical plane. I'll select the center point. And if we've written down or recall from our toothbrush head, we picked a 7mm diameter. So there it is. I'll say stop sketch. Go back to my home. I can do the create extrude or E on my keyboard, grab that profile, drag this blue arrow back, the negative, I'll do minus 3mm. And that will fit exactly inside that toothbrush head. If you were really manufacturing this, you want to look at tolerances. Maybe it wants to be slightly smaller so it fits. But for this learning exercise, we'll call this good. Now I want to create a little bit of a base to this as well. So for that base, I'm going to create an additional shape. And for this other shape, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to do a cylinder this time. So I'm going to come up here to the Create, and I'll find the Cylinder tool. We'll also create that on the same vertical plane. I'll give it the same center point. Its diameter is going to be a little bit bigger. I'm going to do a 10mm diameter. I'll hit Tab to lock that in, and I can click to set that. And I can adjust the distance here. I'm going to also do 3mm on that one. And join is okay. These are going to join together, and I'll say OK. Now to wrap this up, I might come Create, or say Modify and Fillet, or F on my keyboard. Click these two profiles, and I'll do a 0.5mm. And say OK. Now I can right click and add appearance, and I will drag and drop the white plastic material onto this object, and I'll say OK or close. And I've got that material now set. Now with this connector, I need to create the entire body of the actual toothbrush. And for that, I'm going to use these sculpting tools. So I'm going to go over here to Create, and I can find the Create Form, which also sometimes is up here at the very top toolbar, this purple shape. Click that, Create Form. And in this case, I'm going to create a cylinder. I don't want to use that same vertical plane because now I'm starting to have some distance here between that and this vertical plane. If I adjust my view here, I can see that vertical plane is now there, buried inside of my component. So I'm going to click this outside face now. And I'll set the center point there, pull the mouse away, and I can give this a diameter. I'm going to do 25mm in my case. I'll hit Tab to lock that in, and I can click, set that. That starts the cylinder here. I can pull this down, or I can also type in the height as well. I'm going to do 120mm. I can adjust the height faces and diameter faces, and that's fine. So I'll say OK. So there is my toothbrush body. And that's the thing I'm actually going to grab onto with my hand when I brush my teeth. So it wants to be ergonomic. You can design this any way you'd like to. I might start off by doing a Modify Fill Hole. I'm going to fill these ends, and we'll notice there are different options. I can do a fill star, or reduced star, or collapse. I'm going to do a collapse for the bottom, and I'm also going to do a Modify Fill Hole, and I'm going to grab the top and collapse that as well. Now it kind of has a default curvature to that, and I might even notice that doesn't quite touch the connector like I'd like it to. So what I can do is double click these rings to select the entire ring, and I can say Edit Form, and I can drag and adjust those. Now in actuality, you notice that that center point right here is not changing. So I might actually invert that shape a little bit, which can be okay because at the end of the day, I'm going to combine these shapes together. Maybe that's fine. So you might want to do that. You can also double click out here. And even though it's kind of far away, you can use that to adjust because it affects second points and get a flatter edge if I'd like to. I'm going to pull this closer here, get that curvature, and then double click this guy. And the closer the two lines get together, the flatter and flatter that shape gets. You can actually get it to be a pretty flat shape if you'd like. So adjust that to your liking, and you can do this for both the bottom and the top. I'm going to call that good. Down here on the bottom end of things, I'm going to double click, edit form, and I could adjust this one, or actually for the bottom, probably better to double click the second ring. And again, in Fusion 360 in the sculpting tool, when you adjust the third line over, so you can think of that point as the first 1, 2, 3, you're going to adjust the second line, but not the third. That's going to stay put. Adjust this over, and you can see what happens. Flatten out the bottom of that toothbrush nicely. So there's that. Something you can play with if you'd like your shape to be symmetrical, what you can do is turn on symmetry, and you can say this side is the same as that side. And this only works if it's still symmetrical. If you've already adjusted it beyond that, you can't go and add it later, but that's symmetrical. And symmetry will allow me to do things where I edit one side, and it's going to adjust both sides. I'll adjust my views. You can see this a little bit better. If I pull this out, for instance, whoops, wrong one, this guy. If I pull this out, you can see that yellow form in the back. It's adjusting both of these at the same time. So you could adjust your toothbrush if you'd like to have a different shape or form, depending on what you want it to look like or feel like when somebody grabs this toothbrush. Once you're happy with that, if you want to make some non-symmetrical moves, you can do that as well by turning off symmetry. So I can say symmetry, clear symmetry, and it's gone. And that would let me do a move like this, where I can say edit form, and then break that symmetry, and make a totally different shape. So it's your toothbrush. You can have any shape you'd like for this form. I'll just make an adjustment here for mine, and something like this, and we'll call it good for this guy. Now that's that overall toothbrush body, so you can make that shape be whatever you need it to be. Once you're happy with it, you can say finish form, and there's that toothbrush shape. Now I might want to add some additional definitions, some grips or ways to hold this, and some other design features. I'm going to create a sketch here, and again, these are up to you. I'm going to do a spline, control point spline. I'm going to put it on this vertical plane. And for me, I'm going to start out here. I'll dive into the model here. Kind of follow this curve and come out of the model there. And I'm happy I'll hit this green checkbox, and it's going to finish that curve. Now I might create some additional geometry here. I'm going to create a line, and I'm going to use this midpoint right here, or the origin point, and create a line that is exactly right down the middle. I'll select that and right click. I'm going to make that a normal versus construction and change that to construction. Makes it a dashed line. And now I can do the sketch mirror. I'll pick this object to mirror, and now my mirror line is this dashed line. So I've got that same spline on both sides now, and say OK. And I'll do stop sketch. What I can do from here is, under modify, I can do a split body. Grab this toothbrush body, and the splitting tool will be this top line here, and I'll say OK. So now if I open up my bodies here, I've got this body 1, which is that connector component, body 2, which we just created, and body 3, the main body. Now that only did it to one side, so I've got to do the other side as well. I'm going to turn on my sketches, turn on that sketch 3, and I'll repeat the process, and I'll say modify split body. What's the body to be split? It's this main body here. And the splitting tool, I'm going to select this piece down here, and I'll say OK. And now both of those have been split. And I can turn off my sketches and minimize this. And a couple cool things I can do now that they are separate bodies. I can grab them. I could even pull them apart. But what I'm going to do first is say modify, press and pull. And I can grab these faces. And if you have a split like I do, where it's not convenient split, I've got this extra line here. Just make sure I click both faces. And I can drag this in. I'm just going to type this in, minus, I'll start with 0.5 millimeter, see what that looks like. It looks pretty good, so I'll say OK. And I'll repeat this on the other side. Grab this bottom shape, just make sure I look at it, everything looks fine, and I'll do the same thing, minus 0.5 millimeter. There it is. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Maybe let's do another extra piece on the front. So I'll do another sketch. I'll do a spline. I'll do a control point spline. I'll do this one on the ground plane here. And I'll follow this curvature this time. I'll start up here, dive into the model here, hit this point, and I'll come out of the model down here. And hit the green checkbox is fine. I can see I'm not super happy with the lines yet. I'll hit escape on my keyboard and I can drag these control points until this curvature is behaving how I want it to go. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to call that good there. I'll say stop sketch. And I'll repeat that same process. You can see it picked up some of those purple lines. That's okay. It just noticed I hovered over some existing geometry and it found those. You can delete them during your sketch or leave them. It's okay. And I'm going to say modify split body. Grab this body, and my splitting tool is this line. There it is. I can split that face off. And I can repeat a similar process. I can say modify, press and pull, grab this face, and I'll try minus 0.5 millimeter. And we'll say OK there. Great. So I've got a couple different shapes here. And I can keep going with this tool, split body, split face, lots of cool things we can do. I'm just going to add a couple grips to this face. I'm just going to do a construct, I'll do an offset plane, and I'm going to turn on my origin, grab this vertical plane and pull this out. I'll just type in 60 millimeters, something proud of the overall model, and say OK. Now I'm going to create a line here on this plane, and I'll just create a vertical line. Don't have to be too precise, just make sure it's vertical. And I'll hit the green checkbox. I'm happy with that line. Under sketch, there is a command called rectangular pattern. I can click this line and then drag this arrow to the end, and I can add in any quantity I would like. So I'll do 5 of these. I'll say OK. And what I can do now is do a split face. So I'll say stop sketch, and I can turn off that origin and minimize my bodies. And what I'll do is do modify split face. Face to split is this inside grip, and the splitting tool here will be this line. I'll split that, and I'll say OK. There it is. Open up my sketches to turn it back on because it disappeared. And I'll do a modify split face again. This face, and I'll pick the splitting tool, second one. And I'll go on down the line to do all of these. With the faces split, I no longer need my sketch turned on. I'm going to use the light bulb to turn that off. But I have these faces now split, and I can do some cool things. I could use the press and pull tool like I did before, or now I can use this line to create some pipes. I'm going to create a pipe. I can do these one at a time, and I can do a cut, which will actually cut that out, which might be cool, or I could do a positive join. That's going to add that in there. right click and repeat the pipe and do that for all of these. So now I have my shapes. It's looking pretty good. I might at this point right click and add some appearance. So I'm going to use that white plastic. I can drag that onto the different parts. If I want to use different colors, I can do that here. Different types of plastics. Maybe I want to even use that glossy plastic if I'd like. A quick tip, a way to apply this to the whole thing, instead of dragging and dropping onto the materials, onto the objects individually, I can grab to the top of my body up here in the menu, let go. I can say remove the old materials and place the new material on everything. And that's a pretty good trick, especially if I want to go and only apply a different material just to certain parts of this toothbrush. I don't need to individually select anything except for the different materials. Alright, and with that, I might come back, and to wrap this up, I could add some fillets if I'd like to. So maybe I'll go ahead and say modify fillet, grab this edge. Because there's already a lot of curvature here, I might do a pretty small radius on that fillet. I'll try 0.1, maybe even 0.2, something pretty small. Might be fine to start with and see what that looks like. So now that I've got some material on here, I can add some fillets. I'm going to say modify fillet, grab this edge. There's a lot of curvature here, so I might want a larger fillet than I've used before. We think of the radius between two very similar curves. I might go something a little bit bigger, like a 2 millimeter, or even 4. Something big. If I want it to be real nice and smooth, I can do that. And I can repeat that, right click and repeat the fillet, and I can do that on the back side. And I'll do 4 millimeters on that one as well. And say OK. Alright, so it's looking pretty good. Happy with this for now. So I'm going to go ahead and save it. If you're concerned about these two shapes pulling in together, there is a tool here called Modify Combine. You can combine this shape with this and say OK, and now they're one geometry. You can do that as well. So I'm going to save this, and I'll notice it after I say OK. It's going to populate here, and I have my toothbrush body. Now at this point, I can take this toothbrush head and insert it directly into this design. No problem with that. But if I want to create an assembly, especially an assembly where I have lots of people working together, notice I have this people button up here, and I might want to have different people do different components of this assembly. I might want to keep everything separated. And if I want to do that, which we will for this tutorial, I'm going to click this plus sign up here again. So plus sign, new design. And I'm going to save this guy. I'm going to call it this time Toothbrush Assembly. This is where we're going to assemble the different parts, different components of this toothbrush. And so to do that, I'm going to start with the toothbrush body. I'm going to find it here in my data panel. I'm going to right click and say Insert into Current Design. And there it is. It brings it in. I can make adjustments. I can rotate it. Place this anywhere I'd like to. I'm going to go ahead and rotate it this time. I'm going to put this vertical 90 degrees. And once that's looking pretty good, I can say OK. So there's that toothbrush body. And now I can find this toothbrush head, and I can right click on that, and I can also insert this one into the current design. Now this one's less critical where I locate it because I'm going to assemble it in a little bit. I just need to pull it away just for the sake of it's easier to see it off to the side. And I'm going to say OK. And now I'm going to create an assembly. In Fusion 360, I have my assemble tools up here under Assemble. I can pull this down and do a joint. Now there's a logic to this. I can see it's asking me to do component 1, component 2. The component that moves is component 1. So that's our brush. He's just floating off here on the side. So I'm going to zoom in here. And I want to click carefully on the inside there. If I can't see it, I might orbit around until I'm looking inside here. But I want to get the inside of this socket. So I click down in there. That's component number 1. And this part's really fun because you're going to assemble it together. So I can zoom up here. And where is that inside going to go? It's going to go land right here on this top. So my second click is component 2 right there on the top. Click. It's going to bring that toothbrush head up there and assemble it. And you saw it shook a little bit because it's a rigid connection. There are other options here like revolute, slider, depending on how you want this thing to come together. But rigid is fine for the toothbrush because these are interlocking parts that would just go there and stay there. The one thing I noticed that the toothbrush is oriented the wrong way for my design. I want it to face a different way. So I'm going to come in and use this rotate tool here to 90 degrees. I'm going to do that right in my joint command so it assembles that direction. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And that's locked that toothbrush in there nicely for me. And I've created an assembly, and I can see now that it's an assembly of 2 parts, and they're not just components that are inside of one Fusion design, they're actually externally linked. And so I get this link symbol here, and I've got both of these components. The cool thing about this, if I make a change in any one of these other designs, I can get an update here. So for example, if I right click and I say appearance, and let's just make some changes here. I might want to edit this material and make it even just a different color, something as simple as that. Make it a little bit lighter, and I'll say done and say close, and I'll save this. It's going to save it, and I see it's going to save up to the cloud here in my data panel. And if I go over to my main toothbrush assembly, I get this little warning. So that little yellow triangle lets me know that the component's out of date, and I need to get the latest version from whoever changed it. You see this now on V3 version 3. So I can right click here and I can say get latest, and that's going to update in this assembly. And so there it is. It's really cool because you're working with other people. They might make a change and you've got somebody with this master assembly, and they can update all those components as they need to. Once I'm happy with this, I can hit save. It's going to save the latest version. I'll see that full toothbrush assembly show up here in my data panel. And now I can move on to the rendering. If I can say model and render, go to this render environment, adjust my camera view. I can go to my setup and I can make all sorts of changes here. I can adjust the camera angle, make it more dramatic. I can adjust what the aspect ratio is, widescreen or 1:1, adjust the environment library, and so on. Once I'm happy with that, I can click render, and I can do either a local render or cloud render to get the final result. And that's it for the toothbrush tutorial.